Just before this episode, I wanted to tell you you can get more from Never a Truer Word by subscribing on Spotify. If you are a Spotify listener, and 90% of you are according to the stats, then you can subscribe to get early access to the weekly episodes, video episodes so you can follow along with the statements, exclusive subscriber episodes, and a chance to leave comments for future episodes too. Go to the Spotify page for Never a Truer Word and press subscribe or unlock. And if you do decide to subscribe, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hello and welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and give you some tips to understand when you may be hearing deception in your life. And we're back at the trial of Karen Reid for this one, and we're going to look at butt dials, because Canton, where the incident happened, seems to be the butt dial capital of the world. In fact, two of the witnesses at the trial talk about butt dials. I think we're dealing with 8 butt dials over a 2-hour period. Now, when did you last make a butt dial with the advances in cell phones? I haven't made one for quite a while, but quite a lot of them happen here, and we deal with them in the trial. If you're interested in this trial, there's a playlist which is linked in the show description where you can look at more analysis of Karen herself in a TV interview that she gave, and of the witnesses in this trial and what it is that they're saying. So who made the butt dials? Jen McCabe and Brian Albert made the butt dials, and we're going to look at how they talked about those butt dials in their witness testimony to see were these really butt dials or not, because actually at the times they happened could be something suspicious around them. So let's see, are they being truthful and honest that they don't know about these phone calls, or are they hiding something? If you're new to this channel, then we only look at the words that people use in their statements. So we're not going to consider evidence or other things that we know or things that we've heard. We're only going to look at the words spoken by the person that we looked at. We're going to look at the words they use, phrases that they use, concepts that they introduce, and so on. But we're only going to look at the words that they give in their statements. And we're going to talk about butt dials. And let's just define what a butt dial is for a moment. Originally, it was your phone was in your pocket, and inadvertently, something pressed against maybe the call button or something, and a call was made that you didn't mean to make. But butt dial has become a phrase to mean a wider range of inadvertent phone calls, and that's what we're going to take the meaning of butt dial to be as we analyse what these people are saying. So let's start with Brian Albert, and here he is talking about his butt dials.
Put your phone on your nightstand?
No.
Where'd you put your phone?
The phone was in bed with me.
So your testimony is that you get in bed after being on a road trip all day long, then at restaurants and at bars, then at a get-together at your house. And when you go to bed, you don't charge your phone?
No. I had the phone in the bed with me.
Why would you have the phone in the bed?
We have 5 kids, and if somebody was trying to call or if I needed to reach them, it's just kind of a habit I do. I put my reading glasses and my phone in bed with me.
And you don't charge it?
Sometimes I charge it, but not as a routine, no.
So you're worried about having your kids out. They might need to get a hold of dad, so you make sure that your phone is nice and close, but it can just run out of batteries?
Well, if it's dying, then I'll put it in the charger, but if not, I just leave it on the bed.
Well, what about that night?
That night, the phone was on the bed.
How do you know?
Well, I remember the phone being on the bed.
You have a specific recollection from 2.5 years ago about the state of the battery charge on your phone such that you know it was in your bed that night?
No, I just know as a routine, I keep my phone in the bed with me.
That's not what you just said. You just said it depends on whether or not the battery needs to be charged. It's whether or not you charge it.
My answer is that sometimes I, of course, charge my battery.
Of course you have.
But I sleep with the phone in my bed.
Every single night?
Yes, mostly every night.
So what did you think of that then? Let's go through the first part of that. He's asked, you put your phone on your nightstand? He says, no. He's asked, where'd you put your phone? He says, the phone was in bed with me. And the lawyer says, so your testimony is that you get in bed after being on a road trip all day long, then restaurants, then at bars, and you have a get-together at your house, and when you go to bed, you don't charge your phone. And he says, no, I had the phone in bed with me. So he's very emphatic here. Twice, he's talking about the night in question, so the night of the butt dials. He says, the phone was in bed with me, and I had the phone in bed with me. Especially that second one is in response to a question about the day that he had, the specific day leading up to the incident. So he's asked about, he's told he's at the road trip. He's told he went to restaurants and then at a bar and then a get together at his house. So it's very specific that he is talking about that day. And he says specifically in his answer, I had the phone in bed with me that day. He's talking in the past tense, so the phone was in bed with me and I had the phone in bed with me. So he really is referring to that specific night, and he's talking in past tense as well, which is what we'd expect when someone is talking about past events. The lawyer then asks, why would you have the phone in bed with you? And Brian Albert says, we have 5 kids, and if somebody was trying to call, if I needed to reach them, it's just kind of a habit I do. I put my reading glasses and my phone in bed with me. And he's asked, and you don't charge it? He says, sometimes I charge it, but not as a routine, no. So he's asked, why would you have the phone in bed with you? And he goes into storytelling mode. He doesn't start by talking about why he actually has his phone in bed with him. He goes into explaining, and he says, we have 5 kids. And that's the first part of his answer. So why would you have your phone in bed with you? I have 5 kids. It's not quite a direct answer. And then look, he's saying, from that, you get the impression that he has a lot of children and they want to get hold of him. Sorry, kids. They're not young children anymore, but we have 5 kids. So that's why I have my phone in bed with me. If one of these kids needs to get me or I need to get them, then my phone needs to be close at hand. But just look what he says. We have 5 kids, and if somebody was trying to call, not one of the kids, just somebody. It's not we have 5 kids and if one of them was trying to call. No, the kids have disappeared here and it just becomes somebody. And also, if I need to reach them, the them is undefined. You could assume he means the 5 kids, right? But them is undefined. And actually, if he was talking about the 5 kids, if I need to reach one of them, would be kind of the language that you would expect. So actually, this answer is not about those 5 kids at all, is it? It's about a generic somebody. And he might need to reach them as well. Interesting, because the concept that's been brought up around this butt dial is that a butt dial was made, and then the call was hung up, and then the person, Brian Higgins, who he made the butt dial to, or the alleged butt dial to, called him back. So this is, if somebody was trying to call, if I needed to reach them, so he's actually talking about a two-way conversation there. Somebody was trying to call, or if I need to reach them. But it's really not about the 5 kids at all, this answer. You'll see that the question is specific. Why would you have the phone in bed with you? So why would you have the phone in bed with you? Specific, and given the conversation that's gone before, it's about that night. However, his answers, we have 5 kids, and if somebody was trying to call, if I needed to reach them, it's just kind of a habit I do, put my reading glasses and my phone in bed with me. So he's talking about his habit there. And then, and you don't charge it. And he says, sometimes I charge it, but not as a routine. No. So he's talking about sometimes, and he's talking about a routine. So the question was very specific. Why would you have the phone in bed with you? But his answers are in general. He talks about what he normally does, not about what he did that night. He's then asked, so you're worried about having your kids out? They might need to get hold of dad. So you make sure your phone is nice and close, but it can just run out of batteries. He says, well, if it's dying, then I'll put it in the charger, but if not, I'll just leave it on the bed. Bit of a stutter there. He goes to say, I think if it's dying, I'll charge it. And he changes that to, I'll put it in the charger. I don't know what that means, but I've noticed it there. There's something going on there where he was going to say, I'll charge it. And then he says, I'll put it in the charger. I don't know what, potentially there's something going on in his head that the phone charging cable is next to the bed, and actually you could charge the phone while it's still in the bed, and he wants to talk about it being away from the bed and put it in the charger. I don't know, but it's an interesting change that he makes there. And then he says, I just leave it on the bed. And there are 2 different words at play here. He's talked about earlier that the phone was in bed with me. He said that night, the phone was in bed with me. I had the phone in the bed with me. He said, my phone in bed with me. And this time he said the phone is on the bed. Two different things. In the bed tends to mean under the covers. You know, if I am in the bed, I am under my duvet. If I am on the bed, then I'm lying on top of the duvet. The exact same thing. If other things are in the bed, then they are with me under the bedclothes. If they're on the bed, it's on top of the bed. So why the change there? One of the reasons for that is this isn't true. So he doesn't have the authentic language to describe what happens, which is why sometimes the phone is in the bed and sometimes the phone is on the bed. The conversation continues. What about that night? He says the phone was on the bed. How do you know? Well, I remember the phone being on the bed. He's asked, you have a specific recollection from 2.5 years ago about the state of the battery charge on your phone such that you know it was in your bed that night. And his reply is, no, I just know as a routine, I keep the phone on the bed with me. Once more, the phone is now on the bed. It's not in the bed, it's changed. So there's a lack of consistency about his description of where the phone was. That night, the phone was on the bed. I remember the phone being on the bed. I keep my phone on the bed with me. He's asked, what about that night? And his answer is, that night, the phone was on the bed. How do you know? I remember the phone being on the bed is what he said. He's very emphatic and certain. He's very certain that the phone that night was on the bed. He says it twice. He's asked, what about that night? That night, the phone was on the bed. How do you know? I remember the phone being on the bed. And then he's asked, as a specific recollection, you know your phone was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you know that night, you have a recollection, a specific recollection that night that the phone was in or on your bed. And he just says, as a routine, I keep my phone in bed with me. So from being certain that night the phone was on the bed, he's now saying, when he's pressed on it, as a routine, I keep my phone on the bed with me. He's talking in general. He's not being specific once more about this. You'll see he's actually deceptive here. He's asked, how do you know? He says, I remember the phone being on the bed. He's asked, you have a specific recollection, which is what I remember is. You have a specific recollection from 2.5 years ago. And the first word of his reply is no. So he's being deceptive. He's saying, in certain terms, the phone was on the bed. And when he's pressed on that, he says, no, I don't know if it was or not, and talks in general terms. And this is picked up on by the attorney. He says, that's not what you just said. You said it depends on whether or not the battery needs to be charged as to whether or not you charge it. The reply is, my answer is that sometimes I, of course, change my battery, but I sleep with my phone in my bed. And the phone is now in the bed. You'll notice I sleep with the phone in my bed. And he's asked every single night. He says, yeah, mostly every single night. So once more, we have this, I sleep with the phone in my bed. Now that's general. I sleep with the phone in my bed, but it covers every night. I sleep with the phone in my bed. And he's asked every single night because that's what he's just said. I sleep with the phone in my bed. And he's asked every single night. And he says, yeah, mostly every night. So he's being deceptive again. He's saying every night I sleep with the phone in my bed. And when pressed, and this is what happens with him, this is the pattern here, when he's pressed about what it is he's just said, he qualifies it out and says, yeah, mostly every night. Some more from Brian Albert.
Sir, did you make any phone calls after you went to bed between the hours of 1:45 a.m. and 6:30 a.m.?
Yes.
Who did you call?
I inadvertently called Brian Higgins.
What time?
I don't recall the exact time. After 2.
2:22 and 35 seconds. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Did you speak to Brian Higgins at any point between 1:45 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. that night?
No.
You say you inadvertently called him at 2:22 in the morning.
Yes.
How did you inadvertently call him?
Well, I don't know because it was inadvertent.
So I have to explain that.
Well, it's kind of like a butt dial.
Kind of like a butt dial. All right. How long have you used an iPhone?
A long time.
Are you saying that from your closed and locked phone, you inadvertently tapped your phone one time and that initiated a butt dial to Brian Higgins.
Objection.
Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Tell me what you're saying. How
I
did you butt dial Brian Higgins?
I don't know.
22 in the morning.
I don't know that the phone was locked. I could have been looking through my phone. I butt dial people often and make inadvertent calls. I could have hit a last call from him by accident, thus calling his phone.
So you were actually awake and on your phone at the time.
I was awake, and I could have been looking at my phone.
So, Mr. Albert, how'd you miss the call 17 seconds later?
Well, my wife was in the room with me, and we were hanging out, and I never got the second call from him. So I'm not sure what time he called. I'm not sure what I was doing at that second, but I don't know.
But it didn't go to voicemail.
Well, I didn't get a voicemail from him, no.
So it didn't go to voicemail.
Well, I don't know that it didn't go to voicemail. I just know that I didn't receive a voicemail from him.
So if you, okay,
I mean, we're all guessing here, but I mean, he could have called voicemail.
we're not all guessing.
Well, you are, because you don't know if he left a voicemail or didn't, or at least got voicemail and then hung up the phone.
Gets a bit tetchy there. So the beginning of that segment, the question is, did you make any phone calls after you went to bed between the hours of 1:45 and 6:30? He says yes. He's asked, who did you call? I inadvertently called Brian Higgins. And what time? I don't recall the exact time. So let's zone in on the second question there. Who did you call? And he says, I inadvertently called Brian Higgins. So he's getting ahead of the story here, because he's not asked how did you call or what mode was the call made in. He's only asked who did you call. So I called Brian Higgins would be the strict correct answer there, but he adds the word inadvertently in there. And when someone's extra, when someone adds something to the answer of a question that's not required to actually answer the question, it's important to that person. To that, the thing they've added is very important to that question, and that is inadvertently here. So he wants to get ahead of this and get ahead of what the questions are he knows are coming, to say that this was inadvertent. He's asked what time. I don't recall the exact time. He says it was after 2. It's put to him 2:22 and 35 seconds. Does that sound familiar? He says yes. Did you speak to Brian Higgins at any point between 1:45 and 6:30 a.m. that night? He says no. Yes, no, very straightforward answers. They tend to be believable because he's not being extra. He's not giving more there. You say you inadvertently called him at 2:22 in the morning. Yes. How did you inadvertently call him? Well, I don't know, because it was inadvertent. You'll have to explain that then. And he says, well, it's kind of like a butt dial. So 2 of those answers start with well. And when someone starts an answer with well, so if you ask someone a question and they say well as the first word, that's an indication that an explanation is coming, not an answer to the question, just an explanation is coming. Not always deceptive, it's just pointing out that what's coming isn't really the answer that you're looking for to a question. It's the person taking a bit of control around the conversation and reframing the question, or maybe trying to point out why the question is a bad one or the question can't be answered. And he starts 2 of his answers in that part there with the word well. And then he says, it's kind of like a butt dial. And kind of, so with some people, can be part of their speech patterns. It's kind of like this, kind of like that. It's not really, that I've seen from Brian Albert, part of his normal speech when he's answering questions. This is the first time I think we've heard kind of in this section of the testimony that we've been looking at. So he's not saying it was a butt dial, it was just kind of like a butt dial. So there's a lack of firmness there around his description of this call being a butt dial. He's then asked, how long have you used an iPhone? He says, for a long time. Are you saying from your closed and locked phone, you inadvertently tapped your phone one time and initiated a butt dial to Brian Higgins? Is that what you're saying? And he says, no, that's not what I'm saying. Tell me what you're saying. How did you butt dial Brian Higgins is the question. And he says, I don't know that the phone was locked. I could have been looking through my phone. I butt dial people often and make inadvertent calls. I could have hit a last call from him by accident, thus calling his phone. So you're actually awake and on your phone at the time, is the question put to him. He says, I was awake and I could have been looking at my phone. Here he talks in general again. So we are talking about a specific incident, this call to Brian Higgins, and he talks in general and says, I butt dial people often and make inadvertent calls. And this is a technique that some deceptive people use. Not only do they move from the from the specific incident that they're talking about or being asked about and talk in general terms, there's also a bit of social proof here. This happens all the time. I often butt dial people. I make inadvertent calls all the time, very often. So this is nothing suspicious here. But we're not talking about what happens all the time. We're not talking about what happens in general. What we're really wanting to know about here is this specific point. So why has he moved away from this specific point? How did you butt dial Brian Higgins? It's a very specific question. And he moves into the general, saying, I butt dial people often and make inadvertent calls. He is being asked about the phone being locked, and he says, I don't know that the phone was locked. Now, if you just isolate that, the phone was locked, I don't know that the phone was locked. Did he know the phone was locked? Is this leakage of the truth coming out? The phone was locked, therefore, for this butt dial to happen, could be really interesting. He is saying the phone was locked. The phone was locked. I don't know it, but the phone was locked. And you'll note how vague this is. I could have been looking through my phone. I could have hit last call. I could have been looking at my phone. So he's not committing to any of this whatsoever. He doesn't say that he was looking at his phone and perhaps that, I was looking at my phone. So perhaps that's how the calls were made. It's I could have been looking at my phone. So he's attempting to offer up an explanation for this, but it's only a potential explanation. He has no words to say that this is what happened, that my phone wasn't just on my bed. I was looking at my phone from time to time, so maybe that's how the calls happened. No, he's just offering up potentials. These things could have happened. He's then asked, so Mr. Albert, how did you miss the call 17 seconds later? And we have another answer that starts with well. Well, my wife was in the room with me and we were hanging out and I never got the second call from him. So I'm not sure what time he called. I'm not sure what I was doing at that second, but I don't know. But it didn't go to voicemail. Another well. Well, I didn't get a voicemail from him. No. So the first question of that section is, how did you miss the call 17 seconds later? And his answer is, I don't know. But he takes a long time to get to that I don't know. It's at the very end of the answer after a whole lot of other words. Words which do not answer the question, how did you miss the call 17 seconds later? If you look at it, he says, well, my wife was in the room with me. That's no reason as to why you would miss a phone call. We were hanging out. Again, no reason as to why you would miss a phone call. I never got the second call from him. Irrelevant. You were asked how you missed the call, not that did you get it or not? So then I'm not sure what time he called. I'm not sure what I was doing. None of these to answer the question, how he missed the call 17 seconds later. I don't know does answer the question. I don't know is normally a very truthful answer if it comes directly to the question, but it doesn't come directly. There's a lot of waffle all the way, irrelevant waffle, just explaining a situation, but not saying how that parts of that situation then would make you miss a call. For example, my wife was in the room with me and she was playing her iPad really loud, or we were watching and laughing at something on her iPad, so I wouldn't have noticed if the phone rang or not. It was on silent. That would be an explanation, yeah? We were hanging out, so I was actually interacting with my wife. My phone was not on my mind, so if someone called me, I would not have seen it. But he doesn't finish any of those thoughts off at all. He just puts up things, potentials, but he doesn't explain why any of those things means that he missed the call. He's asked, but it didn't go to voicemail. Again, we have some rambling. I didn't get a voicemail from him. No is the actual answer to that. It didn't go to voicemail. He says no at the end of that. So he's admitting there it didn't go to voicemail. Despite what he says, I didn't get a voicemail from him, he puts no in there. So the lawyer pushes him on this. So it didn't go to voicemail. And he says, well, I don't know that. Don't know that it didn't go to voicemail. I just know that I didn't receive a voicemail from him. So we're all guessing here is what he said, but he could have called voicemail. The lawyer says, we're not guessing. And he says, well, you are, because you don't know if he left a voicemail or didn't, or at least got a voicemail and then hung up the phone. So once more, he's saying he does not have an answer here. I don't know. He could have called voicemail. So it's all these very vague terms. And he says, we're all guessing here. Actually that fits with this, these things could have happened, these things could have happened. He's guessing, and he says, we are all guessing here. So he's talking about everyone, including himself. We is part of, you are part of we. Yeah. So we are all guessing here. And when it's put to him, we're not all guessing, he says, you are. So this is accusatory against Alan Jackson, the guy asking him the questions. You are, because you don't know. I think that is very much the gist of what his testimony is around voicemail, is that you, the world, the lawyer asking the questions, doesn't know the answer. And that's why he's just putting out coulds and perhapses and really vague stories around this butt dial, because no one knows how it happened. Maybe Brian Albert knows how it happens, but he's confident that he can put all this stuff out there because no one knows for certain what happened with that butt dial. I'm going to have another look at some Brian Albert testimony here because the butt dial was to Brian Higgins, and he's asked twice in the court about a call he made the next morning to Brian Higgins once John O'Keefe's body had been found on the lawn of Brian Albert's house. He's asked first by the prosecution about that phone call that he made to Brian Higgins.
Who, if anyone, did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of you?
I called Brian Higgins.
Why did you call Brian?
Because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and that what had happened.
And he's asked the same question roughly by the defense later on.
But on the morning you find out that John O'Keefe is laying dead or dying on your lawn, the first call you made at 7:20 was to Brian Higgins. Is that right?
Yes.
The same person you had a call with, or at least the logs indicate you had a call with at 2:22 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
During that 7:20 a.m. call, did you two discuss the 2:22 a.m. calls?
No.
Thought you just said that you told him, oh, I think I may have butt dialed.
Yeah, that was later in the morning when he came to the house.
Not on that 7:20 a.m. call.
No.
What did you talk about on that 7:20 a.m. call?
I informed him of what was going on at my house. We were out the night before, and I thought it was important for him to know what had happened.
Now, I pulled these off because there are some similarities there in the language to the answers and the questions on both sides, and I wanted to look into those. So, from the prosecution, he's asked, who, if anyone, did you call or notify in regards to the situation that was going on at the front of your house? I called Brian Higgins. Why did you call Brian? And his reply is, because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and what had happened. So we get an answer in the past tense, which is exactly right. It was important for him to know. I'll notice he doesn't finish off that thought. Why was it important? He doesn't tell us why it was important. He just thinks it was important for him to know. And this is important. This is not just, nice or anything like that. It is important, or it was important. And then the tenses as to why he called. It was important for him to know what was going on and what had happened. Now, this is about past events. So there's a lot of past tense going on there. But if you just look at what he says, it was important for him to know what was going on. So the going on is the present part. So what was happening at the point he made the phone call that morning. So it was important for him to know what was going on at that time and what had happened. That's past tense. So that's what had happened prior to the phone call. So as we know at the moment in Brian's telling, the first that he knew about John O'Keefe being found unconscious on his lawn was when he was woken up by his sister-in-law. And that was the first that he'd realised. So at that point, he must know that there was something going on. That is that they had found John O'Keefe on his lawn. I think at this point he'd been taken to hospital. What had happened? Why does he think something had happened? Why not just what was going on? I'm interested in that. I mean, obviously something happened, but he's putting these two things into two separate buckets, if you like. There was things going on at the time he called Brian Higgins, and there were things going on. There was the police were there. They were investigating why this body had been found on his lawn. And what had happened, that's what is leading up to the discovery of the body on the lawn. Now, it's obviously that something had happened, but it's very interesting that he has two separate things going on. There was something going on and something had happened. Next question from the defense this time was, what did you talk about on that 7:20 call? This is the one to Brian Higgins. And he says, I informed him of what was going on at my house. We were out the night before and I thought it was important for him to know what had happened. This is a very similar answer. He's very consistent with his answer here. We have the same things happening with both answers to the question. So it's very consistent. Therefore, I think there's a lot of truth in it, but let's dig into what that truth is. I informed him of what was going on at my house. I thought it was important for him to know. So again, we've got the same things going on, but again, he doesn't explain why it was important to tell Brian Higgins what had happened. He just says it was important. If it was a relative of the person who had been found, or a very close friend of a person who had been found, or whatever, then that would be a reason. I thought it was important to let them know as soon as possible or I wanted them to hear it from me. He doesn't say why it was important. It's just what was important. We've got the same things going on again. He informed him of what was going on. Present tense, that the police were there, that a body had been found, that there was an investigation starting. I don't know which part of was going on, but he was talking about what was going on at my house at the time of that 7:20 call. And once more, he also thinks it's important for him to know what had happened. So talking about the past, the lead up. Which he doesn't really know. In his telling, he went to bed, fell asleep, woke up, and the body had been found on the lawn, or the unconscious John O'Keefe had been found on the lawn. So what had happened? We have to have really, really consistent answers around both, but I want to know why he explained it like that. What was going on at the time of the call, and what had happened? We'll come to Jen McCabe shortly and talking about her butt dials. If you are new here, if you press the subscribe button, then you'll get content like this as soon as it is released. If you want early access, if you're on YouTube, you can become a member of the channel and you get the videos earlier than everyone else. If you're listening on Spotify, you can subscribe and that way you will get early access and exclusive content as well. Just hit the join the channel button on YouTube or subscribe on Spotify. A like or a plus button or whatever is on the platform that you're looking at means this gets to more people. I know a lot of people are interested in the Karen Reid trial, so you can share this with them as well, or just hitting that like button just helps this get to more people. And as always, your comments on this, they were on the last video on the Karen Reid trial I made, then the comments were all right. There was only one or two ones which she was like, you haven't looked at the evidence. I don't look at the evidence. But the comments always much appreciated as well. Okay, let's have a look at Jen McCabe talking about her butt dials.
But these calls were what? These missed calls, incessant missed calls. What were they? You used a word. Matter of fact, it's two words.
I believe I used the word butt dials.
You claimed that every one of these calls was a butt dial. Is that right?
Yes.
So according to you, you literally butt dialed John O'Keefe's phone 6 times in the span of 19 minutes. Is that right?
I don't remember making any of those calls, so my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket, and that was it.
She's asked, these calls were what? These missed calls, incessant missed calls, what were they? You used the word, 2 words, and she says, I believe I used the word butt dials. So she's just saying, I believe I used the word butt dials. She's not actually coming out and saying it because she was a very, very difficult person. She liked to qualify almost everything she said, especially around sensitive areas where she wouldn't actually say, I used the word butt dials. It was, I believe I used the word butt dials. Many of us don't like being told we said the wrong thing or we did the wrong thing. And she seems to have that in abundance. She wants to qualify everything she says. So if she's pulled up and you didn't actually say that, she can say, no, I said, I believe I used the word butt dials. I didn't say I did use the word butt dials. Kind of useless when the next question is, you claimed that every one of these calls was a butt dial. Is that right? And she says, yes. Okay, Yeah, great witness. So according to you, the question is put to her, you literally butt dialed John O'Keefe's phone 6 times in the span of 19 minutes. Is that right? And she says, I don't remember making any of those calls. So my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket and that was it. So she doesn't answer the question. According to you, you literally butt dialed John O'Keefe's phone 6 times in the span of 19 minutes. Is that right? She doesn't say yes. She says, I don't remember making any of those calls, so my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket. So I don't remember, and my assumption, she's not committing to anything. She's saying things, but they are very vague. And actually, if you don't remember anything and you're making an assumption, then the answer literally means nothing. She finishes her answer there with, and that was it. That's an attempt to shut an answer down. And that was it. I have nothing more to say about this. I'm going to tell you, I don't remember anything. I'm going to give you my assumption. I'm going to tell you where I put my phone. And that was it. There is no more, is what is being signaled by that. My phone was in my back pocket. There is no more. That was it. And just look at that answer there. So according to you, you butt dialed John O'Keefe's phone 6 times in 19 minutes. I don't remember making any of those calls, so my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket and that was it. She doesn't finish the thought. She doesn't say, I put my phone in my back pocket and it must have, the calls must have come from my back pocket. Maybe I sat funny. Maybe I put my hand in my pocket to get something out and, hit the call button or anything like that. But she doesn't finish the thought. She tells us where her phone was, but she doesn't tell us why that would lead to butt dial. So I don't believe she really believes that at all. Here's some more from Jem.
When you dial someone by mistake, you hit a button, set your phone down, the phone has to be open. You'll agree with that, right?
Correct.
Can't be locked, because it takes several iterations of movement to get a phone open. Face ID or password, right?
Correct.
So when you hit the button by mistake, walk away, that's a butt dial. People call butt dials. What happens with the call?
I assume it goes to voicemail.
It's a good assumption, because that's exactly what it does, isn't it? You've had a phone for a lot of years, right?
Yes.
It rings and rings and rings until it goes to voicemail.
Correct.
So in order to hang up that butt dial, you have to interact with that phone yet again, don't you?
Yes.
So if you had 6 butt dials, 7, I think it's 7 butt dials, you'd not only have to interact with the phone once to butt dial John, you'd then have to interact with it every single time to turn off that phone ringer so it doesn't go to voicemail, wouldn't you?
I suppose.
Which makes 14 interfaces with that phone over the course of 19 minutes. Is that right?
I mean, I guess I don't have it all right in front of me, but there were also text messages I was sending. So again, maybe I said, oh, shoot, I called them, and then I turned it off.
But your claim is you don't remember those incessant butt dials and those incessant hang-ups at all, correct?
I honestly don't.
So we have some very straight answers from her for the start. When you dial someone by mistake, you hit a button, you set your phone down, the phone has to be open. You'll agree with that, right? She says, correct. Very straightforward. She's not going to argue with this one. It can't be locked. It takes several iterations of movement to open a phone, face or ID or password, right? She says, correct. So when you hit the button by mistake, you walk away. That's a butt dial. People call butt dials. What happens with the call? And she says, I assume it goes to voicemail. So once more, we've got this qualified answer of, I assume it goes to voicemail. She's told good assumption because that's exactly what it does, isn't it? You've had a phone for a lot of years, right? She says, yes. Again, really quick, truthful answer. No qualification or anything like that. It rings and rings and rings until it goes to voicemail. She says, correct. So in order to hang up that butt dial, you have to interact with that phone yet again, don't you? She says, yes. So we're getting really straightforward answers to the questions here. So if you had 6 butt dials, 7 butt dials, you've not only had to interact with the phone once to butt dial John, you then have to interact with it every single time to turn off the phone ringer so it doesn't go to voicemail, wouldn't you? And she says, I suppose. So from all these yes answers and corrects, we get I suppose. So she's a change of pattern there. Sensitivity, I think, to the question and the concepts that are being raised there. Alan Jackson continues and asks, which makes 14 interfaces with that phone over the course of 19 minutes. Is that right? She says, I mean, I guess I don't have it all right in front of me, but there were also text messages I was sending. So again, maybe I said, oh shoot, I called him, and then I turned it off. So look at how she does not answer the question. He says, it makes 14 interfaces with that phone over the course of 19 minutes. Is that right? And she says, I mean, doesn't answer the question. I guess. And then she says, I don't have it all right in front of me. What does that matter? But there were also text messages I was sending. So she just brings up lots of different concepts, not really answering the question at all. And this is the bit that really got me. She said, there were also text messages I was sending. So she's saying that I was sending text messages at the same time as these calls were happening. So maybe when I was sending text messages, I hit call by mistake and then it turned it off. That's what she's saying there. There were also text messages I was sending. But wait, previously she said, I don't remember making any of those calls. So my assumption is I put my phone in my back pocket and that was it. So I put my phone in my back pocket and that was it. There was nothing else. She didn't mention the text messages at all there. So she's actually now given us two very different explanations as to why these butt calls could have happened. One was, my phone was in my back pocket and it was there all the time, and that was it. That means it was there all the time, and therefore the butt dials came from my back pocket. And now she's telling us that the phone was not in her back pocket. So her assumption was she put her phone in her back pocket, but now there are also text messages she was sending. So she's given two different and very different discussions about, or descriptions of what her phone or where her phone was and what she was doing with it that night, which is really, really interesting. She says at the very end there, so again, maybe I said, oh shoot, I called him and I turned it off. Now, so again is saying, indicating that she said this before, but she hasn't said this specific thing before about maybe I said, oh shoot, I called him and I turned it off. Now, people who are deceptive quite often use phrases like, as I've said before, as you know, to say, I've said this a lot of times, because when someone is lying, when someone is being deceptive, they often feel the more often they say the lie or the more often they say the deceptive part, the more it will be believed. They also want to point out, I've been really consistent because I've told the same lie 3 times. But look, I don't want you to think it's a lie. I want you to think I've been consistent. And if I've been consistent, if I've said this a lot, then it must be true. And that so again is really interesting, because she's saying so again, but actually she hasn't said that part before. So why is she saying so again? I think that is to be persuasive and to be manipulative. The final question is put to her, but your claim is you don't remember these incessant butt dials and those incessant hang-ups at all, correct? And she says, I honestly don't. Now that's interesting, because when someone feels the need to tell you they are being honest, it can be an indicator that deception is happening. Truthful people, they just tell the truth in general. They just say what they experienced or what their answer is. They don't tell you they are being honest. When someone has to put a flag up and say this is honest, you have to worry about everything. I guess 2 things can be happening there. I honestly don't remember this, is what she's saying there. Is she telling us this is honest because actually everything else has been rubbish and not true, and she has to say this is honest? Or is what's happening here that it's not honest and she feels the need to flag it as honest so that it's believed? So those are the butt dials of the Karen Read trial. What do I think about that? Well, both of those witnesses, Brian and Jen, rather than say these are unexplained calls, I have no explanation for why they happened, they both attempt to explain them. And both give a couple of reasons as to why these things could have happened. Now, Brian Albert isn't straight with his version of where his phone was. He really isn't. He talks about what he does in general, and he says specifically that night the phone was in bed, and then when pushed on that, he says, I don't remember, actually. So he's very not straight at all. I don't believe his phone was in bed with him. It would take much more to convince me of that. And Jen also isn't straight with her phone was. She does say it was in her back pocket, and then she says it was in her hand and she was sending texts. So they are both not straight and not convincing me around these butt dials. I would have to hear a hell of a lot more from them to be convinced that these phone calls that they made were not deliberate. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you can. Don't forget to share this with people who are interested in either deception or the Karen Read trial as well. The like or the plus button means this gets to loads more places. There is no marketing budget for Never a Truer Word, so sharing, liking, commenting, subscribing, all helps get this out to a wider audience. If you go to neveratruerword.com, you'll find more podcasts. You can sign up for the monthly newsletter. Get in touch on social media. You'll find all the socials listed at neveratruerword.com. A whole load more videos that you can watch there as well. That's neveratruerword.com. And we'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word.